So, what we want to discuss today is the living spirit. A lot of times we tend to make it more mysterious, more mystical, uh, more unnatural than really it has to be. The spirit is part of nature and it's part of our nature. It's part of, our living, vibrant essence. And so we want to look at it as that natural part of us and come to know it as such and not make it overly exotic. Now, in order to do this, to understand it, we got to understand some of the basics before we get into it, and that may take a shift in our perception and some changes in our beliefs and everything like that. And we won't go into all that discussion, but I'm going to lay the basic outline here, and you can see if it feels right to you or does not feel right to you. But as you can see, even from the screenshot here, where it has the paradox begins, we are living in a paradox. And of course, in the book and in the meetings and everything, we discuss that in more detail. But understand it from this perspective that. Within the paradox of this three-dimensional reality that we live in, what makes it a paradox is there are material and immaterial situations such as the body, the spirit, etc. But it from because we are perceivers, so we both perceive outwardly and perceive inwardly, but the essence of our being is that we are perceivers. And in this 3D reality that we agreed to go through to gain awareness, well, the ordinary events of this reality is what both the material and the immaterial, in other words, the body and the spirit, used. So you cannot take any event and think that it's outside the realm of the spirit, or that somehow your daily job or your daily walk or your daily journey is unattached from the spiritual essence. It's not, but it is that we don't tend to recognize that the spirit is living and walking with us for simple reasons of perception and perspective. And one of the perspective is that the mind is also a critical thing to understand here. Now, I know that you'll see lots of YouTube videos, Eastern methodologies, Western techniques, and they say the mind is your stumbling block and the mind is your enemy, so to speak. Well, none of that is true. The mind is natural to you. Well, that's not quite right, but because in the very beginning it was a foreign installation. But let's say your mind is a critical part of you. It's a functioning part of you. And just like the ordinary events are within the paradox because they're used by both our daily journey in the 3D reality as well as our spiritual journey, the mind is the same way. The mind is part of the paradox. It accommodates both our 3D reality and understanding that, but the mind also accommodates our spiritual reality. That's why when you go into meditation and these types of situations where you calm the mind and shut out the extraneous part of the chaotic world, then you create an environment that's conducive to the spirit, which is peaceful and harmonious and loving, and that type of situation, so that the spirit can enter and indwell, so to speak, and even learn. But the thing to take into account here is the mind is not your enemy, so to speak. The mind is a natural part of you, and it serves both sides, the material and the immaterial. It serves both the body through the logic and through the reasoning and everything, and it serves the spirit through insight and awareness. So that's the first thing that we want to take into account in really coming to understand that our spirit is living and walking with us, on a daily basis. And next, because we are perceivers, you will feel differently in your logic and your reasoning and your emotional being than you do within your spiritual essence. In other words, they may say pride comes before a fall, and that's true if it's incongruous and it's appropriately used. But your pride, which is more of the bodily, the 3D, the egotistical side of you, may come into being and appropriately applied if you're in some type of external event, say a competitive event like a sports game or something. Then you can take pride in your team. You can take pride in your accomplishment. Now, where it becomes different, and that's a feeling that you'll have, but where that becomes different is in your spirit. The nature of the spirit is different than that of the ego. The nature of the spirit is one of humbleness and everything, and you'll feel that difference. You just have to know when it's applied, so that when you're in your more egotistical type of mode, then you're going to feel differently than you do when you're when you're accessing your spirit in that mental side of you. So you want to take that into account. So now this is guided by your beliefs, that you've socially grown up with and been taught and, accumulated over things. So you have social beliefs, but then what you have to be aware of too is that you have spiritual beliefs as well. Your social beliefs are going to come from your academics. They're going to come from your social situations. They're going to come from science, and they're going to be changeable depending on the evidence. But really, the goal is hopefully is that you get to some beliefs that are true for everybody, even though they're social types of beliefs. Then the spiritual beliefs then are going to be awarenesses and direct knowledge that comes to you. They'll come to you differently. They'll be learned differently. They'll feel differently. And they will be not changeable. Those spiritual beliefs will be immutable truths that you will never find to be incorrect or never find to have variations to them. They will always be true, and they'll be true for everybody. They'll be true for all people. So you have both your social beliefs and then you have your spiritual beliefs, and you have to compartmentalize them so they're used correctly in the correct domain while you're going through this 3D experience. But they're always both accessible to you, and you should be where it's very ordinary and customary to be building up your social beliefs. You have to endeavor and endure and actually do some changing to then become aware, constantly aware and gaining more awareness to accumulate the order of social beliefs, because remember, the social beliefs are based on awareness and direct knowledge. So then what is awareness? Very simply, awareness is the knowledge of the practical application of the Spirit and greater insight into the spiritual realm. So when you're trying to know the Spirit, that's what you're trying to do. When you're trying to know the Spirit, you're trying to gain more insight into the spiritual realm. You're trying to know, well, how can I work? How does the Spirit function so I can functionalize my life with it better so that it's not in discord? Because remember, the Spirit lives in harmony. That's the part that it lives in. And it will only come into your being as it's invited in, really. People may think I have a spirit guide and the Spirit leads me. That's not it. You actually are here accommodating the Spirit. So the Spirit can only come to you as you actually accept it and invite it and come to understand it and come to be, as we say, aware of it. So here's the thing in a nutshell. We already said that we're perceivers. We perceive outwardly, but we also perceive inwardly. So when somebody says, love yourself, well, remember, we're living in a paradox. That is a part of nature that you cannot get away from. You are a natural being. You're also, to some degree, a supernatural being in that your spirit, of course, is not material and not a visible entity, but it is natural to you. So when somebody says to love yourself, that could be the same as come to love yourself, know yourself, help yourself, change yourself. It could be all those things. But here's the key to that. And this is where we're getting at in coming to know the living Spirit, is that you have to understand that phrase can be looked at and heard in two ways. Yourself being all one word, and yourself being two words. And that's what makes up the paradox. Because yourself, all one word, is your embodiment in the 3D reality with all the senses and understandings that go along with that. Where yourself, two words, yourself, the self that we're speaking of here, is the Spirit. So that you want to know that those two aspects of the self, which is yourself and yourself, are always present and always part of you and always integral as a holistic being, which you are. So when somebody says, love yourself, we're going to break that down just a little bit here. That would say is something you can do as you gain more awareness, because as you gain more awareness, and remember, awareness is the knowledge of the practical application of the Spirit in the spiritual realm. As you gain more awareness, you automatically gain more understanding of love. So that if you gain so much awareness that you're totally enlightened, then you are just the embodiment of love itself. Now, that's, we strive to grow both parts of our being, both mentally and physically healthy, but also spiritually healthy. And we do that by gaining awareness. Well, the first step then is to love ourselves. or love yourself. So that what is the perspective on that? That means the self, two words, the self is it's the spiritual part which embodies love, is coming to love yourself, the 3D reality that you look at in the mirror and that you're accustomed to. So you have to have that perspective and that feeling. Oh, well, there's two parts of this self, and the one that is from the spiritual domain is and can love the one from the 3D reality. And clearly you can see the extension of that is the first part of being aware of love, because if you don't love yourself, you won't be able to truly love anybody. And so that's the first part of it. Well, how does this happen? There is a technique called stalking yourself. That's yourself, all is one word. You're stalking it. In other words, at the same time that you're doing things like listening to YouTube videos, listening to different people speak on spiritual matters, the same time that you're reading Spiritual Essence, that you're trying to learn of the Spirit is actually trying to know you. But you have to let the Spirit stalk yourself. It has to catch yourself so that the self, which is the Spirit, can actually catch yourself in a moment of anger or a moment of revenge or a moment of despair or, any negativity type of situation. So the Spirit can catch it. Now, when it catches it, then you have the ability to change. You have the ability to go to the more loving direction of it. And so at the same time that you're trying to know the Spirit, be aware that the Spirit is also trying to know you, but you just have to let that happen. It happens because you first recognize there's two parts of yourself. You let both parts function naturally as their nature would imply. So that's what we wanted to say about, first understand the living Spirit, and just to keep this video short. So hopefully these video discussions are some value and on topic, especially for the members who reside too far to make the meetings. But if there are any comments or questions from any member on any of the videos, please just leave a reply or a comment in the discussion, then we'll continue. And also, if you can come to a meetup, great. But either way, you should know that you are part of a community that cares. So just enjoy each day.